Welcome to another episode of Management Muse. I'm your host, Cindi Baldi, and this is my husband and co-host, Geoffrey Tumlin.
Yellow! Welcome to the podcast where we try to inspire better work performance. Thanks for listening. All right, welcome back to another episode of the Management Muse. We're here with our good friend and people guru for our topic today, people skills, Barry Couch. Hello, Barry.
Hello, Jeff.
Hey.
Yep.
Hello, Cindi.
Thank you.
That's right.
The technical director.
Yep.
The lady that makes it happen.
Yep. She definitely got us all organized.
The wind under your wings.
That's right. Yep. Let me tell you a little bit about Barry. Very interesting guy. Texas, born and bred, went to the University of Texas, and then started a career building a company that's, we would call it insurance, but it's a little more complicated than that. It's taking organizations and a whole bunch of different people and banding them together to self-insure. And he's done it throughout America, built a company up. Really interesting story. We'll talk about him. But we wanted to bring him on the podcast because of all the people we know, he's probably the savviest about dealing with people. And so we thought we would start by asking you, where do you think your people skills came from?
And I just want to say,
yeah,
he's not, it's not like you're slick, but you're just really likable. So it seems like you're able to build your networks and exercise your networks.
Yes. Yeah, and it's more than just likability, right? Yes, he's likable, but also he's smart about putting the jigsaw puzzle together.
Yeah, he's strategic.
Yeah. So likable plus strategic. That's not a bad equation for what we're talking about. It's probably some more than that. We'll let Barry talk, but likability plus strategic thinking equals the kind of people savvy that we're talking about here.
And so he's going to give us some of his people savvy lessons eventually here. What was your first question?
First question. Where do you think your people skills came from? How did you get to be good with people?
A lot of that is genetic, I think.
Okay.
My mom and dad were very outgoing. And so I grew up having to either tolerate it, withstand it, emulate it, and you match and mirror. I think that's, if you want to relate to people, you got to kind of meet them where they are, be on their level at some point. And that was important to me to, frankly, I wasn't the smartest guy in the class, so I always had to try to have a way of communicating and engendering, the relationship of where people like you and people want to know more about you and people want to hang out with you. And so you got to do all of that yourself.
Our audience is managers in this podcast. And so let's assume that I'm a manager listening and I'm hearing from the people guru, but I don't have all of the genetic or latent gifts. I wasn't born a people person. What would you recommend would be some things that I might do to strengthen my interpersonal savvy?
You as a leader trying to bring that out of your workers and coworkers and your relationships.
Yeah, that I'm trying to be the best manager that I can be, but maybe I'm a little bit shy. Maybe sometimes I feel like my conversations are awkward, but I'm willing to put in the time. What would you recommend that I do to try to strengthen my skills?
For me, it's always just number one, build trust. Get them to a point where they're willing to talk about things they're comfortable about, not things that they're necessarily uncomfortable about. And there's a whole array of things you can find where people, you can tell immediately it's just not an area they want to go to. They don't want to talk about it. Don't call them out on it. Just Try to meet them where they are and find out what's important to them. If you build that trust and you get them talking, then usually the other technique is just get to know them as a person, not as a coworker. Don't judge them for what they're there for currently, their skills or lack thereof. So socially, take them to lunch, meet them for coffee. Seriously be interested in their family and what's going on. And if that happens, you're usually going to get them to open up a little bit because they've all got something that they can express to you about those feelings. And I think from that standpoint, you got to build that first. That's the foundation.
I was just going to say, I agree with what you just described, and I think that's an important lesson. Like, that's how you get people into your network. Yeah, you invest in them, right?
Yeah.
But I think for, in terms of like the shy, or in my case, like, I'm actually super happy just by myself. I love people. I love when I'm around them, but I'm actually super great on my own. And for me, I can be completely, if I'm not careful and I don't schedule into my calendar, I am going to go out and socialize with my coworkers. I'm going to walk down the hallway and see what office doors are open, and I'm going to engage in conversation, which is super easy to do. But if I don't have it on the calendar for a time once a week or whatever I decide works for getting stuff done, then I never do it, and then I never have relationships. And so that might be something for the more shy or more, I don't know, what do you call me, soul trader?
Yeah. I think it reminds me of a story of years ago. We were called in to help a brand new CEO, and this person was legendary, had done great work before, but was having trouble in a new position. And when he called, we didn't believe it. He's like, "You need to come out here. Things aren't going well." And we're like, "Hey, this doesn't make sense. You're a legend, humma." And he said, "Come on, you got to get out here." And so we went out, both of us, and we spent maybe 4 hours each in the morning doing the interviews. And then we compared notes, and basically his people just didn't even know who he was.
They said they couldn't pick him out of a lineup.
Because he was holed up in the office, he was uncomfortable, it was a new group of people, he was an introvert. And so basically Cindy's advice to the guy was...
No, I took him around.
Yeah.
I made him come out of the office, and then every person we passed, I introduced myself and made sure that like he got their name so he could connect it. Because I think that was like, once he's comfortable, he's good. And we did that for many afternoons. I made him just, everybody we walked by, I was like, "Hey, how are you doing?" Well, no, we had seen him where he already had established relationships and he was phenomenal. But an introvert, you don't know what's coming at you. You don't like to admit you don't know the people. Like, I don't know exactly, because like we didn't dive deep into the whole, psychology of it.
Yeah, we just fixed the problem.
Yeah. But I just kept him company, and I did all the work of doing the introductions.
But not to put too fine a point on it, but he hired 2 consultants and paid us. And our advice was, you have to get out of your office. That was the actual problem.
Yeah.
And the reason we're doing this podcast is because it's like the old saying, management would be easy if it wasn't for the people. But the people are the thing. And it's how we do these complicated tasks together. But it's very easy for things to get off track. And we're delighted to have Barry here because not only is he good at navigating people, and he's got a lot of stories, but he's also excellent at dispensing his wisdom. And so let's get to a Barry example. Can you think of a thorny problem, a thorny people problem that you've had to unwind at some point in your career. And tell us a little bit about that story, and then help us situate what the lesson learned might be for a manager listening to this podcast.
Yeah, unfortunately for me, I have hundreds of examples, which is part of the training of, like, this is not going to work for you, Barry. You've got to crack the code on how to work through these, because this is just part of it. But I was going to backtrack just a minute on getting out of the office and walking around and meeting the people. The example, some of us in your audience of a certain age will remember Tom Peters, and his book In Search of Excellence, I think, was the book.
Yeah.
By the way, I've got a plan one day to write a book in lieu of excellence. But one of his examples is, do y'all remember MBWA? Management by walking around.
Oh yeah, sure.
And it was usually designed mainly for industrial setting of a plant, if you can envision that. But if you can imagine being a worker in a plant and you're just out there doing your routine, day-to-day monotonous job, and your supervisor or boss starts walking around, and he doesn't come, and you haven't seen this guy in a month, there's gonna be a lot of consternation amongst the troops of trying to figure out what's up. But if you'll get out and make it a habit, which I think Tom Peters was encouraging, you've got to do that intentionally. Some people do it naturally. Some people can be annoying about that and abuse that privilege. But I think I agree with it, particularly in today's day and time when we're in a work from home environment. When people are in the office, go see them. And for yourself, get out of your home and go to that office if you have one. It has the same benefit too of writing personal notes and leaving on their desk versus sending them an email and congratulating them, or texting them, which is also in the moment. But to me, that's important. And I've found in the relationship building, the trust element of that, and getting them to break down with you and be a part of your team and be a part of the culture of the company, trying to get them comfortable with you doing that is a huge hurdle sometimes with certain introverted people, but you can eventually get to them. So moving on to your question
of your thorny people example.
Yeah, the best example I have was way back, formative years. I'm the manager. At the time, we only had like 8 employees. We've probably got 27 or 28 now. But we had a great employee, and she was well respected early on when she joined our company. Very smart. I was high-fiving about, man, I've got a great hire here. This is really going to work. She started developing this attitude of being greater and better than everybody else. I don't think she intended to do that. It's just it was a personality trait. Well, you can imagine over time, she alienated herself. And if I were to tell her a situation I needed help with, her response was always a little condescending sometime, or not very helpful, or I don't have time for you. And in the coworker culture, we today try to totally avoid that. We believe in mentorship and the buddy system, and we've got to have the relationship. So this particular employee, I started getting complaints about it, and then I started witnessing it. And it just seemed to escalate. So I guess that would be a thorny issue for me, because what are you going to do about it, Barry?
Yeah.
Great worker.
Yeah.
You want to keep her
Yeah.
because of her skills and competency, but she can become toxic to the culture of the company. And you start thinking, oh, am I going to have 4 people walk out, or am I just going to have 1 person walk out? So, I wanted to save her, which is also a great idea, but it doesn't always work.
Sure, yeah.
Number 1, did she want to be saved? Number 2, am I her savior? So I had it all generally wrong to begin with, but as it turned out, this righteous indignation I was dealing with, I finally had to just get on her level and which was uncomfortable for me, and just start saying, you don't get it. You're not seeing this. Do you not see this? You want to just wake up. I want to help you here. And if this is a problem for you, you may not make it here. That's not our culture. This went on for a while. Finally, she came in one day and she said, I think you're right. I was looking for, okay, we've worked through it. Everything's going to be fine. But the answer was, I think you're right. I don't think I need to be here. And sometimes that's, you want to save them. But in this case, if you spend the time with them and you get to the bottom, they'll arrive at their own conclusion that, yeah, I'm smarter, I'm better, I'm competent, but I'm not going to be a good fit for the culture of this company. And I hate to lose people like that. But that's my best example, I guess. But all the examples are relational and have some degree of that element in all of the kind of problems you get. The easy ones are when they just defy core values, or they're just doing stupid stuff. And you have to say, don't do that again, like parent-child. But in this case, if you're hiring the right people, you just don't know until they, 6 months into that marriage, that this probably wasn't the right hire.
Yeah.
Well, it sort of reminds me of something that you said earlier, Barry, that you learned sort of your outgoing networking skills from your folks, and it was successful in the past, and so you built on it in the future. And I think that that's sometimes an advantage, but I think also sometimes it's possible that that's what's hanging you up. In that example, that lady had a way of working that had probably worked for her in the past. I just think about some of the people I've worked with, and especially females in a certain era where, you kind of had to be tough, and you sort of had to look out for yourself a little bit more. And that may have allowed her to rise, but she failed to see that, in this particular environment, that thing that used to work for her wasn't working. So I think there's one thing to build on the things that have worked in the past, but I think you also have to ask yourself, am I just getting hung up on something because it has always previously worked for me, but now it no longer fits the environment?
It turned out that she had problems at home from a previous relationship. And I just didn't probe into that, but it started manifesting, and some of the coworkers said, oh yeah, we think that had something to do with it. So there's a root cause. There's usually something foundational in there. And sometimes you can help them, sometimes you can't.
Yeah, it reminds me that a lot of times managers, we just do stuff. That's the job, to experiment, to try to construct a good experiment for, I think I'll start with indirect conversation, and then I'll go to direct conversation, and then finally I'll metaphorically grab her by the shoulder, so to speak, and give it to her lightning straight. But we never know what's going to happen. And if you'll permit a billiards metaphor, sometimes we're just putting the balls in motion, like playing pool. And we're just shooting the cue ball out there and starting things, and we never know what's going to happen. If you're listening to this podcast, you don't have to be like Barry. Take some of the ideas and run them through your own filter, your own experiences, your own tendencies, and then try to build the relationships, run the experiments. And Barry said something very important at the start of this discussion about actually practicing difficult situations you may find yourself in. Technically, the term for that is cognitive rehearsal or pre-commitment, where you're running through something, you're realizing when you might get stuck, and then you're pre-committing to how you want to handle it if that comes up in the future. And
Is that what I'm doing?
That's what the technical term is for it.
Oh.
Yeah.
I have a good example of that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was in the PhD program with somebody who he sort of missed some of the social cues, so he'd kind of stomp on people a little bit.
Yeah, he had a, pursuant to this conversation, I already know who you're talking about.
I know.
He had a people skills deficit.
Yes.
And we don't want to beat the point up too much, but it's very hard to be a manager if you don't know how to interact with people. There's three big things that seem to help managers. One is this topic we're talking about, getting along and knowing how to deal with people, or people skills we're calling it. The second is intelligence, seems to help with a wide range of skills. And the third is communication ability. And a deficiency in any one of the three makes the job very difficult.
So back to my story.
Yeah.
So he had this deficiency, and so there was one time where I had another colleague who really loved pink, and so she sort of 50 Shades of Pink, and she was a runner, and I really liked her, and this guy comes up to me and is making jokes about her 50 Shades of Pink and her sneakers, and she's not that far away. And I'm sitting there and I'm just stuck, because if I tell him how I really feel about what he's saying to me, I might I basically ensure that she's going to know that he was ridiculing her. But if I shut up and she is already aware, I look like I'm complicit. And so I walked away from that interaction just angry with myself and the whole situation, and vowed I would never succumb to this again with him. Now, fast forward, I don't know, even like maybe a month, we're in class and we're talking about a definition of a word. Like in PhD program, like it's really important that you get the definitions actually matter. They matter partly because how are you going to measure something if you're defining it differently? And you need to make sure that somebody getting results on a paper aren't getting the results because they have defined something differently than how you define it. So definitions matter. And we are talking about this one concept, and my classmate is having a very hard time with it. And so we go on break, and he goes around to my other two colleagues, and he's making fun of the professor while somebody she went to Stanford with, the professor went to Stanford with, is sitting in on our class. He is a professor at the university too, but he's sitting in our class because they're going to work on a paper together. And I've had this professor as my professor, and I like the dude. And I can see it all coming. I'm like, this dude is going to come over here and he's going to trash talk my professor who I love. And so he comes over, and because I had the chance of cognitively rehearsing the last time that I will not stand for this, he came over and he started trash talking her to me, and I just looked at him and I said, I adore her, which is true, and however she wants to teach me, I want to be taught. And I was the only one who didn't get called into her office and have to write a paper on respect. because I had the opportunity to cognitively rehearse. Those other two guys, they just got caught. They were me in the conversation before. They're sitting there going, what do I do with this? Mm-hmm. And so they're kind of giggling, but they're giggling because they're uncomfortable, not because they agreed. But it looked like they agreed. And so they got blasted because the other professor sitting in the room was like, hey, these people are completely disrespectful to you.
Yeah. And your response, if I'm interpreting correctly, was you were respectful but firm about your position. You didn't accuse or play it back to him in a way that would attack him or undermine him. You basically said, I'm standing my ground, here's how I feel about it. And that's supposed to diffuse the situation most of the time, but it's not easy doing what you did.
Yeah, true, but it helps with people can be so complicated that sometimes you have to fall back on simple ideas and then deploy them into a complicated space. And so this idea of thinking through something before it happens and then pre-committing to how you want to act. And also embedded in Cindy's story is learning from experience. And so we have all these experiences, but how are you collecting that? And how are you actually learning from it? We have a notebook. I have a notebook I'm writing in now. I have a collection of lessons learned. And every time something goes really well or doesn't go well or I screw something up, instead of just saying, dang, I can't believe that, I actually write it down and I try to extract the lesson. And it's practicing difficult conversations, thinking through sticking points, and then somehow capturing your lessons learned. Nothing could be more basic, but essential to helping as we're increasingly managing more and more diverse people.
Hello, Musers. Now it's time for commercial break.
Executive group coaching is probably our most popular and highest impact service. It's a meeting a month, it's 4 hours, and it runs for a year. And it takes executive teams, strengthens the bond between them, and creates the space for conversations that may have previously been elusive. That's almost always, probably 80% has to do with company stuff, and 20% is relational, kind of things that have happened over time between people in the executive team and working through some of those. We've done it for years now. Every place we've ever done it has always signed up for multi-year, and it's probably the most meaningful 4 hours that we spend in companies.
It's certainly the most interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
Sure.
not that there's not interesting stuff happening at all levels in a company, but it's very complex.
Yeah, and so it's for executive teams that maybe you feel like, we've done it in all cases. We've done it in executive teams that have been together a really long time, and they're kind of looking for their next phase. What are they going to do? Maybe they feel like we're getting a little stale. We're kind of in a rut. Sometimes it's for a new CEO coming in and want to gel the team quickly. Sometimes
it's for some of the organizations that were already great and they just wanted to figure out how to take it to the next level.
Yeah. It's basically an accelerant. We're able through, and it's not really voodoo mystery what we're doing. We're creating the space in half-day blocks for conversations that never happen inside organizations because we're external, and so you don't have to worry when you have an internal person leading it. There's always a question of neutrality, and usually the person leading it needs to be in the conversation as well, and so they're trying to dual hat as a participant and a facilitator. And we break it up a lot. In our 4-hour blocks, we deepen the bonds between the executives in a way that they're not going to they're basically not going to tolerate unless it's an outsider doing it. Because you get to ask outsider questions and run them through exercises. And so if you're interested, contact us. ondemandleadership.com. Executive group coaching lasts for a year, 4 hours a month. By the end of that time, you will be having conversations that you've needed to have, but have previously proven elusive.
What's a story that you have where you were surprised because you got it all wrong in terms of people?
Hiring people like me.
What does that do?
Well, the natural tendency of somebody that's not an introvert is to surround themselves with people they like. And so you vacillate toward he thinks like I think, or she thinks like I think, or we like the same thing. And you build when you're hiring. Interviews will tend to strike me, and always struck me, as saying, I don't know if she's the right fit, but I really like her. She thinks like I think. And so you hire her. Rarely does it work. It's a mistake. So I had to learn by a number of marginally bad hires, stop trying to hire people that are like you.
And what makes it a bad idea? Because it's funny because that is actually a theory. It's attraction similarity theory, and it is a tendency for organizations and the people who are doing the hiring to do just that. They find people who are similar to themselves and hire, which is why organizations become more homogenous over time in terms of beliefs and personality. But that doesn't necessarily make it dysfunctional.
It can work.
Why didn't it work for you?
For me, it didn't work because...
Too many storytellers.
Too many people walking around and being like, how you doing today?
Too much people skills.
Too much.
Somebody's got to do the
work.
work.
That's
And
right.
it ain't
We
gonna
need
be
some
me.
executors here.
We can't all be managing by walking around.
Right.
We need to occasionally actually be working.
The first response that comes to mind is, if I'm hiring people like me, I'm not getting a diversity of thought. People are going to learn to emulate me. I've had people game the system with me. What does Barry want? And I got caught finding out that what Barry wants is not what I want. And I wanted different points of view. And so fundamentally, the only thing I want them to be like me is, number one, have a sense of our core values, have some common beliefs that I think are healthy habits, healthy beliefs. But I do not want you thinking like me. I want you to be able to hear what I'm saying, because I'm going to reciprocate. I'm going to listen to what you've got to say. And though we might have a vast difference in opinions about how to reach that objective that we need to reach, if you've got a better path and a way to get there, trust me, it's going to happen quicker than if I take my path and try to get us there. And it'll be better, and the culture around it, the coworkers will say, she did that, Barry didn't. And that's, again, part of what I really appreciate about them getting to the finish line before I do.
Yeah, that's a nice way of saying it. A lot of what we've talked about today is easy to describe, but hard to implement. Listening, getting to know people, building trust. These things are very simple to explain, but it takes that one thing that, we're all short of, or at least think we're short of, time to develop. And yet there's an asymmetry because you can only build these relationships slowly, one good day at a time, but you can disrupt them. I mean, just with a text message, you can disrupt things. And so there's a certain precious quality to strong relationships. And we can do the good news as it relates to management is that the vast majority of the people you're going to come into contact with want to do an excellent job. So Cindi and I sometimes say, nobody wakes up and says, I can't wait to suck today. And so people are trying, and they want to do a good job, and they want to feel proud about the place that they work. And
I'll take that one step further.
Yeah, sure.
Probably if they're going to work and thinking, I'm going to suck today, it's because they're mad. There's probably an injustice back there.
Yeah. Yeah. And, we're lucky because we go into a lot of different places, and this culture that we've spoken about indirectly today in a few different ways plays out differently in the organizations. I mean, we have some companies, there's a company that we're in right now, and they love meetings, and they have meeting after meeting after meeting, and you would think this is a terrible place to work. They never get anything done, but they have a line out the door for people who want to work there. And then there's other places we work that they hate meetings, and they only do them on Zoom, and they only do them every other week, and somehow it works for them. It's
every organization just has a different culture.
Yeah. You can't take a playbook and fit it over from one organization to another, because it's not gonna endure.
Yeah, and to your point, you really can't fake it till you make it. That'll blow up countless times. As you're trying to wrap up, I guess, and summarize the thing I want to remind people of is that if you've heard one version of a management style and things that worked and didn't work, such as we're doing today, you've heard one. And I by no means have figured this out. And I by no means want to leave the impression that what works for me will work for you. And I do want to leave the impression, figure it out, work on it. It's there. The solution on how to be an effective and a good manager and build a company is embedded somewhere in you or your people. And just find what that style is and that personality is of that company and what makes it work, and you've cracked the code. You'll have good employees. I always appreciate what Herb Kelleher used to say. His employees were his customers. If they're happy and doing a good job, they're going to exude the confidence, and the customers will be drawn to that. And I think in part that's what we're trying to impress upon people today.
I think I just want to circle back and pull out something that you said, is that you're still figuring it out, and that like just what you've done won't necessarily work for somebody else. I think embedded in that is, because I do think people are successful sometimes in one situation, and then they think like, this is how I lead. And so then they go to the next situation, and usually they're going to fail because the next situation is not the first one. But even staying within your own organization in the same lane, it's all dynamic. And so you have to, you're not changing constantly, but you have to look around and be like, okay, so what part of what I'm doing isn't working anymore?
Yeah.
Same people, and it worked last year, but it's not working this year.
Because people are complicated.
Yeah.
People,
But
Yeah.
that's kind of the fun of it too.
That, to your point, is things you don't see coming.
Yes.
And you,
No.
but I think very good point, Cindy. You need to be prepared that those days will come. And don't be surprised by it. Go ahead and embrace it, accept it, deal with it. But what you did to deal with that same scenario a year or two ago may not work this time.
Yeah. Yeah, people change, and we have to try to stay current, so our tactics may change. Leaders, managers, experiment, try stuff, see what happens, make adjustments. And then this topic that we're talking about today, as Barry said so eloquently, people skills, you don't have to be born with this. You can work harder, you can get a little bit stretched from your comfort zone and become a better manager. It's very difficult to not at least make the attempt to build strong relationships with your key employees and the key people, your direct reports. It's going to be very hard to be successful as a manager without trying to meet them part way, figuring out a little bit about who they are, and basically doing everything the opposite of what they do on The Office. You gotta
Actually, weirdly,
yeah.
he becomes he somehow Michael becomes somebody you like in The Office. Like
Yeah.
he actually winds up being somebody who actually kind of cares about his employees in a weird way. I don't know. It's an interesting transformation that they pulled off in that TV show.
Is there anything else about our topic today, people skills, developing relationships, managing people, that you want to leave our audience with?
You too can be a manager. And the first reaction by a lot of people is, oh, I just do the work. I don't manage people. I can't do it. Don't want to do it. Whatever their impression is. But everybody has to be a manager at some point, like it or not. Just like everybody has to be a salesperson, like it or not. And finding the path that's most comfortable for you and getting help, and don't be ashamed to ask help. As I said at the beginning, mentors, buddies, whatever you want to call them. The leader of the organization's smart if they want to create that dynamic and hire people like you all to help them facilitate a way to where everybody can be, in some degree, a manager, which can be self-managed. And if they understand what it's about and how hard it can be to be a manager, they'll do a better job of managing themselves, and you won't have to manage them. So embrace it, study it, and keep trying, and never give up on it. It's a necessary and fundamental to a successful business.
So I think that the thing that I pull out with what you've said, Barry, is that basically you kind of strive to be a safe place for others.
That's a good way of putting it.
Which you can have good relationships if you're a safe place.
Well said. Part of that to me means you've got to have a non-punitive environment. And I learned a lot of that from the evolution of healthcare delivery and quality and risk management. We learn from our mistakes, embrace those mistakes, and build upon improving from those mistakes. But avoid the consternation of trying to deliver pain and punish people for it.
It's very forward-looking.
Anything else that you want to say on this topic?
Well, I don't want to repeat myself. So to me, the fundamental code to try to crack and the success of being a good manager is to help people learn why they are who they are, why they want to be a part of an organization, and who in their life they respect the most. And if you can get into the heart as well as the head of the person and get that trust built around that principle, you've got a much better chance.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to learn more about the topic, check out our show notes. And if you want to help us out, like, share, subscribe, and 5 stars are all deeply appreciated. See you next time on the Management Muse.